Code Vein was Shift's attempt at designing a Souls-like with its own anime flair. It was a decent game, all things considered, and many people, including myself, assumed a sequel was the inevitable future. After all, compared to all of Bandai's other anime original IPs, this was the only one to break 3 million copies and now 4 million copies. At least over the course of a reasonable amount of time without remasters and remakes. All of this, of course, as opposed to returning to their less popular other franchise that had been beaten out several times in a row at this point.
Cause the drinks bring back all the memories, and the memories bring back your...
I won't forget you, buddy.
The thing is that part of what interested people in Code Vein was the story. If you are a fan of God Eater, then there are some major connections that could be made within the game, and that are made within the game that allow you, as the player, to conclude that it takes place in the world of the God Eater franchise. So many people, though probably a slim minority, were looking forward to a sequel that gives us insight on how Revenants existed or exist within the God Eater world, and where that ending of the first game would take us in a sequel. But little did we know, the team behind the game was already making one major change. Code Vein 2 does not take place in the same world as Code Vein 1.
But why were you killed? Why did you have to die?
Although the theme of altering history is undeniably thrilling, it carries the risk of conflicting with the narrative established in the previous game. Therefore, Code Vein 2 has been constructed as a newly envisioned world while retaining elements common to its predecessor. That is the official statement given on why Code Vein 2 is not going to be in the same world as the first game. To start off with something quick, this isn't a retcon. A retcon is where past events are revised, as if they did not happen the way they did in the original game. This is taking the franchise and saying, this is one world, that world still exists, but we're not going to be talking about it anymore. We're going to move to a new world, where the lore is different and the characters are different, in order to prevent us from tangling up and actually winding up retconning stuff that happened in the first game. In short, Code Vein 2 is not erasure of what happened in Code Vein 1. It's entirely possible that we get a God Eater game that links back to Code Vein 1's events. It's just essentially that these two games are no longer connected in any direct sense, and instead are just loosely connected with similar elements between both games. And honestly, this makes a lot of sense. One of my biggest worries about the time travel concept was how the developers would play around the first game, because the first game already exists. Time travel gets messy, especially when you already know what has happened in the past. So eliminating that factor is the simplest way to erase concerns about tampering with past timelines that we are aware of, and that we have played through. I also have a personal theory to add to this, since I don't think the developers would ever mention it directly.
We'd like some answers.
Code Vein was originally connected to God Eater. Well, never technically officially confirmed, it is heavily implied with Diauspida appearing at the end of the game, and the alternative or ancient forms of Vajra, Marduk, and Hannibal appearing as DLC bosses. You can technically make the argument that since it was never officially confirmed in a direct manner, that this was just asset reuse, or they didn't want to officially confirm it because they weren't sure of the direction they wanted to go in. Whether you're on the side that it is connected or not, as there are very clear signs that it is really up to you. I'm on the side that it is connected, but I won't fight you if you don't think that it was. It's really not an issue at this point. You're free to think what you want. A personal theory I have that I mentioned before is that they also wanted to avoid writing a timeline that leads directly into God Eater 1. God Eater itself has a lot of established lore. It's hard to determine exactly when Code Vein 1 takes place in that timeline. Based on the events of God Eater Resurrection, we kind of have a determination that it takes place before the first God Eater, but there isn't a huge time gap for that to happen either. So it's a little bit hard to figure out, I would say. But this is exactly what I'm talking about. The problem with adding Code Vein's original story to that timeline is you have to keep in mind that events will happen in the future, and you already have those events written out. Granted, it's very likely Code Vein takes place on a different continent than the God Eater franchise, hence why the two franchises have never mentioned each other. Also because obviously Code Vein's timeline had not been planned out since the beginning of God Eaters. But either way, it's kind of a suffocating process if there's no clear direction in mind. And I'm sure a little while at the writing table, wrapping their heads around what they could possibly do, they came to a conclusion that it would be better to sever off the attachment there in order to not disappoint fans in a way that requires them to retcon the previous game. I assume this was decided fairly early into development, or maybe even in pre-production, probably in pre-production, that the game would separate itself entirely from the original world, disconnecting itself both from Code Vein 1 and from the confines of God Eater's existing world would give the developers more freedom. Also because I feel like the connections to God Eater were done as a just-in-case kind of thing, where you could get fans of God Eater to invest in this new IP. It is more likely than not that Code Vein became more popular than God Eater overall, and now it doesn't need the whole fail-safe connection. You know how a lot of games have these loose connections to their previous entries in order to get you into it, in order to keep you engaged with the world because you think the world keeps growing? And as proof of this no longer needing the failsafe, Code Vein sold over 4 million copies, whereas God Eater 3 really hasn't gotten an official sales count, which probably means it didn't do that well. So in short, the basic theory is that I think the developers just wanted to distance themselves from any connections that would prevent them from working on the narrative they wanted to create. And unfortunately, that meant traveling to a new world instead of building off of the old one.
Hey, Soma, how about a trade, huh? You like corn?
Don't think so.
And of course, if you're a God Eater fan and you've been on this channel for a while, you know that I do deeply care for the God Eater franchise. This is gonna sound like cope, but I don't think this spells the end of the God Eater franchise. Again, it's been 5 years since God Eater 3 wrapped up on updates, and the average development cycle for a game now is somewhere between 5 to 7 years. You also have to take in mind that God Eater 3 was outsourced, so it's very possible that the game's on the back burner because Marvelous is not working on it, or they move to a new studio, or some new studio within Bandai is working on it, who knows. To me, Code Vein was always going to be given priority because of its higher sales and greater reception. There was a part of me that definitely hoped that God Eater would just get priority because Bandai wants to take another shot at it, but that's not where things are right now. The announcement of Code Vein 2 pretty much confirmed to me that Bandai did the smarter business move and chased Code Vein 2 because Code Vein 1 was very successful comparatively. And I know 5 years sounds like a long time, but like I said, it takes a long time to make games. Code Vein 1 came out 6 years ago, and it was supposed to come out before that, a whole year before that. I don't know how many people remember this. This game was supposed to come out literally a full year before its original release date. And then after they had gotten feedback, I believe it was at San Diego Comic-Con, they delayed the game because they said, oh, we got a lot of feedback, and we're gonna need some time to really polish things up for this game, so you're gonna have to give us some time to work on it. And on top of that, Code Vein 1 also had DLC, so it was in development for even longer than that. God Eater 3 released earlier and got free updates for about a year. It is very likely we aren't going to see a new game in the franchise for a while still. And like I said, I'm coping here. I don't think we can assume the franchise is dead just yet. My most insane take is that this collab that God Eater had with Aethergazer that took place earlier this year is a sign that Bandai hasn't given up on the franchise yet. But of course, we've seen mobile game collabs happen for less, just to have the collab happen. So we'll have to see. Either way, I'm still interested in what Code Vein 2 has to offer, despite the fact that it will likely no longer be connected to God Eater. My spirits have been dampened a bit, but I will approach the game the same way I approach all games, with an open mind and high hopes that it'll be good. And you can let me know if you're disappointed that Code Vein is no longer connected to God Eater, or if you just don't really care. Or if you're more intrigued by Code Vein's storyline now, or Code Vein 2's storyline now, because the timeline is not going to interfere with the original game, and that makes you less worried that they're going to retcon events and instead just not touch it. You can leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and subscribe to the channel for more things Code Vein, Bandai, God Eater, and JRPG related. I have just completed Trails in the Sky, so there will be a review for that coming out probably at the end of this month. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.